So to me, the journey has been this incredible, wonderful cycle of excitement that every moment of your time, there's an opportunity and a game-changing moment that speaks to you. It's fate. The real powerful thing is fate talks to you every day. If you don't hear fate speaking, it's because you haven't learned how to listen. That's where the game-changing moments really have their most magic. You really have to love what you do. You have to love what you do. You got to wake up every morning doing what you love doing. Is that easy? No. I've come up to two roads in my life, the path of least resistance and the path of most resistance. I never hesitate. I choose the path of most resistance because that's where I'm going to learn the most. Working hard as a student, as his best student, to go then and meet Buddy and then go into the concert to see that. Now the game-changing moment of the concert, when you go to a Buddy Rich concert at those times, and I probably heard Buddy 200 times live, because he played in the East Coast area of New York a lot, was the fact that there are three different types of people that you meet backstage at a Buddy show. There were all the great drummers in the world, so backstage, I met everyone from Max Roach to Louis Bellson to Joe Morello to Jim Chapin to Steve Gadd to Carl Palmer to, you know, like all these incredible Elvin Jones, Papa Joe Jones, Philly Joe Jones, you know, Art Blakey, all these great drummers. Roy Haynes, it was incredible. They'd go back to meet Buddy, so once you're back there, you're kind of meeting them. So the fly on the wall that I was, and of course the kid that always just, you know, realized what my mom always said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen more than what you speak. So I did that. And what I heard was this camaraderie of great artists respecting each other and hugging each other and having this incredible bond. So that was another game-changing moment, not just being backstage, but seeing all these drummers hug and respect and learn from each other. If a practice pad came out, everyone was sharing their chops and ideas. It was incredible to see this enthusiasm of this drumming party.
You are still learning about the drums?
Well, great question, Liv. You know, I just wrote an article for the magazine Drum Scene magazine in Australia. And Frank Corneola, a wonderful, dear, dedicated, you know, musician and businessman himself in the drumming community, he runs the magazine. He said, Dom, I want you to write an article in every issue. And the last issue was about the constant learner. And I've met so many people. Joe Morello, literally the week before he passed away, I spoke to him on the phone. He was asking me about my feet technique. How do you get your feet to that level of where your hands are at? And we're talking on the phone. He's in the hospital, and we're talking on the phone. I said, well, Joe, I kind of like applied a lot of your techniques of the free stroke and the rebound that you learned from George Lawrence Stone. I started putting it in my feet, and he was excited to hear that. A few days later, he passed away. That inspired me. Jim Chapin, I go to the hospital. Jim Chapin's in Florida at a hospital. I visit him every month. I go to the hospital. I walk in. As I walk in, after going once a month for several years now, I walk in, and the doctor happened to be down in the lobby area. He sees me coming in, and he had seen me every month. He said, boy, Dom, I got to tell you, so Jim's not doing well. He only has maybe hours left. I said, well, we knew this was coming. So I said, I'm going to go up and see him. And the doctor says, come on, I'll join you. So we both go to the elevator, we're walking up, and it's a somber time, and I'm going, well, Jim, he's this legend of what he did and how much he shared with people. The elevator door opens up on the 3rd floor, and we hear a practice pad going along. We hear this practice pad like playing at this ferocious pace. And we, so I said to the doctor, I said, well, as we're walking to the room, he must have a student in there playing. How great is this that towards the end he's hearing someone perform for him? We walk in the room, and it's Jim. Right now, yes, sir. With James Forbes Chapin.
That's my name.
At 88.
My mother's there.
Your mother said, right?
Yeah.
We are here in the, down in Florida, And
Here's one of the things
I had to come this far for a lesson. If there's ever a definition of the word compassion, compassion means to feel what other people feel. If there's ever an example of compassion, you are there. But you balance that compassion with high levels of humility. You are like just a regular guy that is just, trying to discover and uncover and learn and grow, but yet you've created this wave, this tsunami of excitement and musical talent, and everyone is guaranteed when they go to a Steve Gadd concert, they're going to be really blown away and impressed by the spirituality and the music of how it changed them and affected them emotionally. That's a consistent thing that you do, which is mind-boggling. That's why I say, at universities they study Steve Gadd, because of what you've done both as a player and even as a drummer, how you've manipulated the instrument differently, and how you've turned things around and you didn't settle for it. If you started a groove on a different place, you made it work beautifully for that song at that moment at that time. You found that moment.
That's what we were trying to do.
You did it. You did it above and beyond, Steve. On behalf of the sessions, we thank you so much. It's
Dom,
so
thank
great to
you.
do this.
Oh, first of all, I always thought of him as my little brother.
Yeah.
He was 17 when I met him, and he was a phenomenon. He was ridiculous. He played. That was at a time when Vinny wasn't quite Vinny yet.
Yeah.
But I had already heard Vinny, and I knew that Vinny was some kind of crazy force.
Yeah.
And then I heard Jeffrey play something that was very much like Vinny, and so I remember turning around and I said, "Hey, can you do that again?" And he did exactly, like it wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
So I said, "Man, where did you get those kind of chops?" And I figured it was his dad, the famous Joe Porcaro teacher. And he said, "Yeah, Joe showed me a few things, but I used to play on his drum set, from the time I was so small that I couldn't reach the pedals."
Yeah.
So he had been doing it for a long time, and he got technique and chops that were ridiculous at a very young age. And then he said, when I complimented him, he said, my dad and all the goombas, all the guys, they all said to me, "You play too fast, you play too busy, slow down."
Yeah.
And I told him, I can't say what I said here on camera, but I said, "Listen, you're 17 only one time in your life.
Yeah.
You go for it now, man.
Right.
You play as fast and as busy as you want to, because you got plenty of time to slow down."
Yeah.
A couple years later, less than that, he was on this incredible big hit record by Boz Scaggs, Low Down.
Low Down album. Yeah.
And it just showed,
The groove was
that
incredible.
the groove. There was nobody. I just spoke about him a few minutes ago, and I was saying that to be so young, and to be so bad with his pocket, his soulfulness, and his serious pocket. I hate to use that word over and over, but his groove was so soulful, and he was such a young man. I always thought of him as an old soul, and I said, to him many times, you're an old man in a young kid's body. But he was a young man, and was cut down at the age of 38. That's very young. That's way too young. So from the time he came on till 38, age of 38, he was, I will say, one of the best recording drummers I've ever heard in my life. He could do anything, and it was beautiful. I won't say it was perfect, but it was always beautiful what he did. His interpretation. He just was one of a kind. So, and I must say that people have always said that I was one of the biggest influences in his life, and I've straightened this out a few times, but I'll do it again. Musically, he would always try to emulate me, and I would always tell him, because when he'd show me what he had done that he thought was like me, it wasn't it. And I would say, "Listen, you know what? Don't waste your time doing that." I said, "Don't listen to me, because it won't serve you well in playing on records later on and stuff, you know. What's going to serve you well is if you listen to Jim Gordon, listen to John Guerin.
Yeah, Johnny.
I told him all these people to listen to, and then one of the last people I turned him on to was Bernard Purdie. I said, listen to this, and I played him a bunch of stuff, and he flipped out, just like you do when you hear Purdie for the first time.
He loved the shuffle too, man. He loved it.
And then from there, he took it from there, man, and there was nobody as good as Jeffrey. And Vinny and all the guys that got to know him personally will agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And they loved him. We loved him. He really had that sense of aura that you couldn't help but love him.
Oh.
But I'll tell you something, he's smiling now hearing the words from you.
Yeah.
He's smiling now.
Yeah, he is.
Because he really believed in you, and he really trusted you, and he really looked up to you, and he really enjoyed his relationship with you.
Yeah, he loved me a lot. I know he did, and we had real great, serious personal talks, where I know, I can't say it on the camera, but I know what my biggest influences on him were, and they weren't musical.
Yeah.
And we both were crazy at a time when it was very crazy time, and everybody was crazy, and I was an old crazy person, he was a young crazy person, but we were still crazy at that time. But
it's a low whipping technique from the wrist, totally from the wrist. Here's Germanic position. Here's American position. French position. Very, very helpful. Now what happens if I take one of those whips and let it just drop, I get many free taps. Let's say I get one free tap after the first whip, this happens. If I continue and pump that low molar, this happens. If I do it in triplets, where now I play it with 3 strokes, I play the first note and accept 2 free taps or 2 control bounces. And all in my book, Get Your Move, I have the clarity and explanations of all of this. So now the stroke happens here. If I continue the pumping motion, this happens.
To work on.
And repeating the process.
Yeah.
Well, you have always shown the hunger to want to learn. That's something which is an important thing that you always have had. And you've always been driven by passion. That's an important combination. That is amazing that you have continued. You continue to inspire literally millions of people, Steve. And as I travel around the world in my travels, your name always comes up, and always in the most positive, inspired way. You have succeeded. I wish you to continue to succeed.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much on behalf of the sessions.
My
You have
pleasure.
been the best, man. Great, Steve. Thank you so much.
You very much.
If you just understand that what you do is a process and just put your reps in, whatever it is, that a lot of cool stuff happens as a result. So I don't know, just inspiration, it's all over the place. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We have many musicians at all different levels and all different hobbyists and serious players that watch these interviews. In closing, David, what would you say to this next generation with the experiences that you've had, with your continuing on this roller coaster ride of this million gig march? It really is amazing.
Million gig march, right.
It really is. What would you say to them, this next generation, as with those thoughts of your wisdom?
I would have to say, the biggest thing for me, and that I encourage people to do, is to be themselves. Don't be afraid to be yourself.
Yeah.
You can't be somebody else.
Yeah.
I kind of learned this way in the beginning. I wanted to have a signature in what I do, like my heroes.
Yeah.
What I discovered was that they had that because they were being themselves. And it's a little more difficult to do that these days because you have so much media and so many things to look at, right?
Yeah.
when you and I were coming up, there was no social media, there was not the internet, you know, all of that stuff. We had running water, fire, the wheel, those things, right? We had that stuff. You know, learning was on a more local level, right? I mean, it was regional. It wasn't, if you had the chance to see somebody come to play, you know, in your area, cool, but you couldn't watch them on YouTube or anything like that.
Absolutely.
You know, and so you learn from the guys in your neighborhood, you learn from people around you. That's how we learned, right? And so to me that was so valuable, because when you're listening to a recording, you'd have to visualize, you'd have to imagine, well, what are they doing here? And then you'd have to sit down and you'd have to try to put something together. You know, so you right away you're using your imagination to create something for yourself. I remember I spent hours listening to Bernard Purdie and trying to do all this different stuff, and then when I actually saw him play, I realized he's doing it something completely differently. But then also the realization was that, wow, I put together some stuff of my own now based on what I thought I was hearing. You know what I mean?
Perception,
Yes. And so make up a way for yourself to live. Make up a way for yourself to play. Make up a way for yourself to think. You know, just create a life for yourself.
That is about as deep as can be. Fantastic, fantastic advice, David. Thank you so much. You always inspire me. I love you. Thank you. Stewart, this is so great to have some time with you at this point. I have been a fan for years. What I'm amazed about is your life is a movie. You were born here in the States, you ended up in the Mideast. The influence of music that came about you, what had to your...
Actually, the Middle East.
The Middle East. Yes. What was it like? Where did music start in your life? I mean, you played guitar first?
Trombone.
Trombone first.
My father was a jazz musician before he became a CIA man. And he was looking for, you know, his kids to carry the torch of music. And it didn't take. I was the youngest. And so when I came up, the house was full of instruments that had been abandoned by my older siblings. And I started picking them up. There was a guitar, there was a nice piano in the house, and my father's trumpet, which trumpet's actually kind of hard. But my father said, try trombone. So I was in trombone lessons right away, and I liked the instrument itself, and the playing part didn't really click until a buddy of mine pulled out a catalog of Slingerland drums. And the cover was a picture of a drum set. It looked like a Corvette or something to me, you know, just all chrome and cool looking textures and whatever, the pearl or sparkle or red or blue or just wow. And then there's another drum set. And then you turn there's another drum set with more tom-toms. And you turn to another page and there's 2 bass drums and tom-toms. And the last page is a fold, you know, what do you call it? The center fold out.
The center fold out.
Just drums from here to...
And I got a call on a Friday night and said, can you get out here tomorrow night? We've been auditioning drummers for weeks now. We've tried everybody in town. And I said, well, airplanes, you know, out there one day, drums, But I did it somehow, you know. You could get away with those things back then. You can't do it now. I show up and it was a kind of a funny evening. The drummer that came in was a well-known drummer. He had done a lot of Motown West stuff. And the band started playing. Elvis came in. I was sitting in the back, all the way in the back. I had my drums set up because I got there early. The guy walks in and he sits down at my drums. And I heard him say something to somebody, and pretty soon I saw somebody point to the back, so he walks out halfway. Hey man, can I use your tubs? So what am I going to say? No, you know. But so he plays, and everybody's reacting very positively, smiling, like, "Hey, we finally found the guy. You know, this is it." Well, that's it. That's that's all for now. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Everybody's putting their axes away in the cases and this and that. And my friend Larry Mahobrak is the one I was referring to. Goes over to Colonel Parker's table. He says, you know, the guy you just bought a ticket for to bring him out here is back there. So Colonel Parker calls Elvis over, and I hear, hey Elvis, oh guys, we got one more guy to listen to. You can kind of see him like, oh man. So, we play a couple of songs, I can't even remember what. We immediately had a rapport, and we just kind of, like a jazz player would.
Great to have you here in our presence for future generations to witness and hear your incredible journey. I have witnessed you back in the early days when I was doing some teaching at drum headquarters in St. Louis.
Wow.
And you would go and grab a room and you would shed and practice and work on Chick Corea tunes, and you were just always so dedicated to what you did. You were always so on top of the craft, and nothing that I have witnessed, knowing you all these years, has slowed down. You have maintained this incredible pace, which is tremendous. Thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Where did it start? Where did this musical intensity that you have, where did that begin?
Well, I'd probably have to say with my father. Everything that he did, he always strived to, to share with me and tell me that, if you're going to do something, it's worth doing right, otherwise don't do it. That regiment kind of went into all the sports that I did as a kid, and he was actually kind of more hands-on with that because I took an interest to that earlier, than I did the drums.
Nice.
But I took up the drums. I don't know why. I really don't. Can't tell you why. Because I was always into music because, like I said, my dad played piano, my mom was singing, I was an only kid, so there was always music around the house. But for some reason, I was interested in music, always. And when I was 7, I think I wanted to try to play guitar because I was a Michael Nesmith freak. That didn't last too long. That lasted about tired of the smaller drums, tune low thing because acoustically they just didn't say anything.
Right,
so I
right.
dropped the 8-inch tom and I went to the standard 10, 12, 14, 16. Coated ambassadors in tune, maybe a little higher, than I had been doing before. But still with that same kind of principle of close miking and getting the sound happening. And ever since the time I was 14 or 15, well, more like 16, I did dive into the recording engineer aspect because my friend Jay Oliver was into it, and he was way ahead of me, and he was teaching